Carolina has the second most number of barrier islands mile-wise in the country. Only Texas has more. Our barrier islands provide, an economic boost for southeastern North Carolina, but they also provide, important habitat for different kinds of bird species. Of course, living on the coast, barrier islands are some of the most dynamic systems in the world. They are subject to move, particularly around the inlets that we've got. And so there's lots of stressors on these barrier islands. And we, of course, are trying to do things to preserve them, but sometimes, the preservation goes a couple of steps too far. Protecting the barrier islands is an important thing because they're actually a protection for the mainland. So it provides lots of economic benefit as well as ecological benefits for us. And this, of course, the salt marsh occurs right behind some of our barrier islands and beaches. A lot of people don't consider salt marshes much of a treasure, but if you go out there, it's more than just standing in mud. The reason there's so much mud and organics there is because of the high productivity of salt marshes. Many of our marine species use that as a nursery ground. And also it provides lots of resources, foodstuffs for those materials. So whenever you look at the salt marshes, you got to think about all the benefits of it, of providing food for the young, but also a habitat for many of our bird species, for shrimp, for oysters. So it's a real treasure. Carolina bays are one of the things that occurs over a broad area, actually Georgia all the way up to Maryland area. And it's been estimated that there's 500,000 Carolina bays. They are northwest, southeast oriented lakes or depressions that are wetlands. And the mystery about them is we still don't know how they were definitively formed. It turns out that southeastern North Carolina is the site of the most Carolina bays in any state. Carolina Bay, some people believe, was formed, and this is the current theory that's most accepted, is that it's a wind-oriented feature that was formed when we were colder and a little bit wetter in this area, had less plants. But the Carolina Bays provide an opportunity to see what we've got for also isolated wetland areas, and these isolated wetlands provide habitat, ecosystem diversity for lots of plants, particularly things like salamanders. But again, we have a combination of what we call bay lakes like Jones, White Lake, Lake Waccamaw, and then we have lakes that are filled with wetland soils or wet soils. So we have a combination of different kinds of Carolina bays. Blackwater rivers start or head, as we call it, in the coastal plain. The coastal plain doesn't have a whole lot of clay sediments in it. They're called blackwater because if you take some of it out, it looks just like dark tea. And in fact, the tannins that are within that particular area, those tannins are from the organic materials from the swamp areas that occur in the coastal plain. And in the Cape Fear watershed, we additionally have some stressors, and one of those is nutrient loading in our waters. For instance, if we have too much waste or nitrogen phosphate, that would lead to more nutrients in the water and get things like algal blooms. We also have issues in the summertime whenever low flow conditions occur, dissolved oxygen is lower. So these can be stressful as well. Along the Cape Fear River, which is our source of primary water, surface water, for Wilmington, Brunswick, and Pender County, as a matter of fact. That watershed along the sides of it also has what we call bottomland hardwoods. And we can go along the bottomlands now where we see that we've got black gum, cypress, and also some poplar, those kinds of trees provide us with another hardwood kind of tree that is good for industry, but it also provides another habitat, another ecosystem that's important for biodiversity. So it's another treasure for us here in southeastern North Carolina. Longleaf pine is a fire-dependent ecosystem, and it's actually an endangered ecosystem because of naval stores industry and also harvesting over the past several centuries. All of these trees that you see in here are all longleaf, every one of them. And the thing is that you've got to have prescribed fire or controlled burns in order to keep it healthy, because if you don't, shrubs and understory will come in to replace the herbaceous layer. So this one, even though the outer needles were burned, you can see now that the interior is already starting to come back after the fire. So this is why it's really important to have this bare soil to allow these guys to actually reproduce. Carnivorous plants are one of those things that kind of intrigues people. The state carnivorous plant, we actually have an official one, that's the Venus flytrap. It only occurs within about a 70-mile radius of Wilmington. Charles Darwin, in fact, said the Venus flytrap was one of the most magnificent plants in the world. So what will happen is the things crawl in, and there's 3 trigger hairs. They hit 2. People do poach these, and would not be surprised if we would see poaching along the way. Every year there's lots of poaching down in these areas. There are lots of other ones. In fact, in Brunswick County, in Boiling Spring Lakes and the Green Swamp, there's 14 different species of carnivorous plants. And these include not just the Venus flytrap, but also pitcher plants, bladderworts, butterworts, and of course sundews. But that's one of the stressors on both our longleaf pines and our carnivorous plants is development in this area. And that's tending to take away the ecosystems that those particular plants thrive in.